Well, hi there. This is the first part in two or three, I don't know how many videos. We're going to be looking at the myth of Lucifer. So before we get into that, we will talk about the two passages in the Old Testament and one in the book of Revelation that's usually tagged onto them, where people create this story that the devil was once an angel in heaven called Lucifer, which the Bible doesn't teach. But we'll do that in the next video. I need to do an introduction first. And so let's start off with this. What does the Bible say about the devil? And what does it say about his origins? Well, before we even get into that, we need to understand how the phrase Satan was used in the ancient Near East amongst the Israelites, amongst the people of Jesus' time and before. And one way to understand that is to also think about how the phrase evil spirits was used in that culture. Now, most of our English translations of the Bible come from the Greek manuscripts, okay? So the majority of ancient manuscripts that we have of the New Testament are in Greek. There are also Aramaic manuscripts as well. Now we need to remember that Jesus and his disciples spoke Aramaic and lived in an Aramaic speaking culture. Many of the countries of the ancient Near East shared a language and a culture, not just the people of Israel, okay? And also, they used Hebrew when they were reading scriptures in the synagogue or wherever. It was Hebrew they used. And Hebrew and Aramaic are very, very closely interconnected languages. And the phrase for Satan is Ha-Satan or Ha-Shatan, which simply means the Satan. And the word Satan simply means an opponent, an adversary, somebody standing against you. In a court of law, it would be the prosecuting attorney. In personal relationships, it could be someone who is attacking you, opposing you, trying to stop you, being an enemy to you. That's all the word means. We tend to always capitalize Satan with a capital S as if it's a personal name, but it is not a personal name. It simply means an opponent or an adversary. And it's very often used of human beings, somebody being an opponent to somebody else. Also, it's even used of God at one point. The Lord became an adversary, an opponent, an adversary to somebody. He became a Satan to them in the Hebrew. And so whenever we come across the phrase Satan in the Bible, we need to read the context and say to ourselves, is this talking about a spiritual being, or is it talking about a human opponent? By the way, the same goes for a lot of words. The word angel, the Greek word angelos, simply means a messenger. And sometimes it's used of heavenly messengers, and sometimes it's used of human messengers. And so it's the context that dictates whether this is speaking about a human messenger or a heavenly messenger. And usually when it's a heavenly messenger, it's translated as angel. Angelos becomes angel. But if it's a human messenger, it's usually just translated as messenger. The same with the word Satan, okay? It can be a human opponent. But there are also places in Scripture where it is speaking about the devil or devil-type figure. There's very little of that in the Old Testament. It's not really until we get to the book of Job that we see this picture of Satan as a spiritual being, one of the sons of God, that are called before God to give an account for things or to give an explanation and so on. And in the book of Job, Satan is not really an enemy of God. He kind of works under God's authority. He's a tester of mankind. He's a trickster. In many cultures, he would be the trickster figure, okay? And also, we need to remember that the book of Job is not an historical book. It's not part of the history books of the Old Testament. It's part of the wisdom literature. It's a wisdom book. Just like Psalms is about worship and prayer, and Proverbs is about advice for living, and Ecclesiastes is a philosophical viewpoint on the meaning of life, and the Song of Solomon is an actual song that was performed with different parts being sung by different people to celebrate the union of male and female and of human love. So the book of Job is actually written like a play with different parts that would be read out by different people. And so it's part of the wisdom literature. Nevertheless, that's where we first come across this Satan-like figure. And it's not really until after the Babylonian captivity and the New Testament times that this idea of Satan as an enemy of God and an enemy of humankind is more developed. And yes, we do see in the scriptures Satan tempted Jesus, and Satan entered into Judas Iscariot and so on. So there is this devil being, this Satan being. In other cases, the word Satan just means opponent. When Jesus said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan," he wasn't calling him the devil. He was saying that he was an opponent. He said, "Get behind me, Satan. Your thoughts do not come from God, but from men. They are human thoughts, not demonic or satanic thoughts. They're human thoughts." And by thinking in that human way, he was becoming an opponent to Jesus. Okay? So in the Bible, the word Satan can mean anything from just a human opponent all the way to a personal spiritual being that we would regard as the devil. It has a wide range of meaning, but it never tells us who this devil figure, this Satan figure is. It never tells us the origin of Satan. And the Bible doesn't actually tell us very much about Satan, okay? Apart from the fact that there is a devil out there. There's an enemy of our souls. The one who tempted Jesus, okay? The one that is roaming about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour, but we will resist him steadfastly with faith, okay? And so there is this figure. We're told next to nothing about him. We're not told his origins. Some people think, well, is the devil a fallen angel? And the only place we get that from is, "Depart from me to outer darkness, prepared for the devil and his angels and his messengers." Could be human messengers, could be spiritual beings. We're not told. And so we've created this whole story about who the devil is on very, very little information. Which is why, in order to create that story, we have to find two passages in the Old Testament that we'll look at in the next video, that are not about the devil, but are about human kings. It says it clearly. And then we apply that to the devil so that we've got some kind of backstory on him. We don't need a backstory on him. There's evil spiritual powers, and there's evil human beings. There's evil in the world, both the physical and spiritual world. But Jesus has delivered us out of darkness and into the kingdom of his Son, the kingdom of light. And so we should be living in the light. We should be aware that there is evil out there, both human evil and spiritual evil, but we don't need to be obsessed or caught up with it. And we need to remember that the Bible does not tell us much about the devil, who he is, what his origin is. And also the Bible, when it uses the word Satan, is not always talking about the devil. It can be talking about another opponent. All we need to do is read the context to find out what is being spoken about here. The same applies to evil spirits. You know, the word demon is translated from a Greek word that really means a demigod. It means an actual spiritual being. And so whenever we read about evil spirits in the Bible, we immediately, with our Western way of thinking, we immediately conjure up an image of like a gremlin, a ghoul, an actual being that enters into people and possesses them and has to be cast out. But in Aramaic, like Satan, the phrase evil spirit can mean a whole range of things. It can mean that at one extreme, but it can mean a whole range of things. Evil can also be translated as bad. Spirit can also be translated as wind or breath. Bad breath is one translation of evil spirit. Okay. Probably a really good modern way to translate those words would be, instead of evil or bad, negative, and instead of wind or breath or spirit, energy, negative energy, destructive energies. And that is kind of the way the Aramaic people thought about it, because the word evil spirit can mean anything from having bad luck. You know, an evil wind blew through that village and bad luck came to it, type of thing. An evil wind, an evil spirit, okay? It can mean having bad luck. It can mean having mental health issues that we would have, you know, medical names for today, but they would just have regarded it as negative energy, evil spirits working in our life. And it can go all the way to actual beings that need to be cast out. Which is why sometimes in the gospel, Jesus cast out evil spirits, and sometimes it says they brought people with evil spirits to him and he healed them. So let's not have such a tight definition of evil spirit that it only means one thing. It can mean a whole lot of things. And let's not have such a tight definition of the word Satan that it only means one thing. It can mean lots of things. And even when it does mean the devil, an actual spiritual being, the Bible does not tell us much about him. It does not tell us his origin. And it certainly does not say that he was an angelic worship leader in heaven who was cast out of heaven and took a third of the angels with him. That is the myth of Lucifer, which we'll look at in the next video. So I hope you'll stay with me. See you then.